You saw the ad in the back of a comic book when you were 8 years old and your whole body went still. A submarine, a real submarine, 7 feet long, big enough for 2 kids, Periscope, torpedoes, rockets, $6.98. You looked at that ad the way you looked at nothing else in your life. You believed it. Every word, every picture, every impossible promise on that page. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. The ad was in every comic book in America. It did not matter if you read Superman or Batman or Spider-Man or Archie or Richie Rich. If you turned to the back pages, past the sea monkeys and the X-ray specs, and the 100 toy soldiers for $1.25, you found it. A full-page illustration of a submarine with a conning tower and torpedo tubes and a boy inside, looking through a periscope at the enemy. The text said Polaris Submarine in letters big enough to read from across the room. It said over 7 feet long. It said big enough for 2 kids. It said fires, rockets, and torpedoes. And at the bottom, in a box with a dotted line you could cut out with scissors, it said $6.98. Send check or money order to Honor House Products, Lynbrook, New York. You stared at that ad for weeks. You brought the comic to school and showed your friend, and he stared at it too, and neither of you spoke because what was there to say? A submarine for $7. That was less than what your father paid for a bag of groceries. That was less than what your mother spent on shoes. For $7, you could own a submarine that fired torpedoes, and you could sit inside it with your best friend and look through a periscope and see the enemy coming, and nobody at school would ever look at you the same way again. You would be the kid with the submarine. That was better than being the kid with the mini bike. That was better than being the kid with the BB gun. You would have a submarine. The savings started that night. You emptied the change jar on your dresser and counted $1.43. You needed $6.98 plus postage. You did the math on the back of a homework assignment. $7.75 to be safe. You had $1.43. You needed $6.32 more. Paper route money was $3 a week. 2 weeks and 2 days. But you also owed your mother 50 cents for the window you cracked with a baseball. And you needed $1 for the school book fare. So 3 weeks, maybe 4. You could do 4 weeks. 4 weeks was nothing. 4 weeks and you would own a submarine. You mowed Mrs. Henderson's lawn for 75 cents. You returned bottles at the grocery store for a nickel each and came home with your pockets clinking. You carried Mrs. Patterson's groceries to her car on Saturday morning and she gave you a quarter and you said, "Thank you, ma'am," like your mother had taught you. And you walked home with the quarter squeezed so tight in your fist that the ridges left marks on your palm. Every night you counted the money on your bed. You sorted the coins into stacks, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, 1 stack for the submarine fund, 1 stack for everything else. The submarine stack grew. $3, $4, $5.18, $5.90, $6.41, $6.98. You had it. You had exactly $6.98 and your hands were shaking. You cut the order form out of the comic book with your mother's sewing scissors. You filled in your name and address in block letters because the form said print clearly. You put the money in an envelope, bills folded flat, coins taped to a piece of cardboard so they would not jingle and tempt the mailman. You sealed the envelope and wrote the address on the front. Honor House Products, Lynbrook, New York. You walked to the mailbox at the end of the street, you pulled the handle down, you put the envelope inside, you closed the handle, and your $6.98 disappeared into the postal system of the United States of America. And all you could do was wait. Allow 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. That is what the ad said. 6 to weeks. You were 8 years old. 6 weeks was longer than summer vacation felt. 8 weeks was longer than the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You did not know how to wait for something for 8 weeks. You did not know how to want something that badly for that long and not go insane. But you tried, you went to school, you did your homework, you ate your dinner, you watched television, and every day at 3:30, when you got off the bus, you walked to the mailbox before you walked to the front door. You opened it, you looked inside, nothing. Day after day after day, nothing. Week 1 was excitement. You told everyone at school you had ordered a submarine. A real submarine, 7 feet long, torpedoes, Periscope. Tommy said you were lying. You showed him the ad. He went quiet. Week 2 was anticipation. You started planning where to put it. The basement? No. The backyard? No. The garage. The garage had room. You measured the garage floor with a yardstick, 7 feet. It would fit between your father's car and the workbench. You told your father you needed space in the garage. He said, "For what?" You said, "My submarine." He looked at you for a long time and said, "We will see." Week 3 was doubt. You lay in bed at night and thought about the ad, 7 feet long, big enough for 2 kids, for $6.98. Your father's lawnmower cost more than that. His toaster cost more than that. How could a submarine cost $6.98? Something was wrong. Something did not add up. But the ad was in a comic book, and comic books did not lie. Superman was in that comic book. Superman would not let someone lie in his own comic book. You pulled the covers up and you pushed the doubt down and you went to sleep believing. Your father found out. Maybe he saw the cutout page in your comic. Maybe he saw you counting coins on the bed. He sat on the edge of your mattress and said, "What are you saving for?" You told him. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Do you remember the Revolutionary War kit?" You did remember. Last year. 100 soldiers, a fort, a cannon. What arrived was a bag of flat plastic pieces the size of postage stamps. You had cried. Your father said this is going to be the same thing. You said, "No, it is not." He said it is. You said the ad says 7 feet long and big enough for 2 kids. He said the ad says whatever it takes to get your money. You looked at him and you looked at the ad and you chose the ad. Because when you are 8 years old and a picture shows you a submarine with torpedo tubes and a periscope, and the price is $6.98, you choose the picture over your father. Just this once, just this one time, you choose the dream. Week 4 was fear. What if the money got lost? What if the mailman stole it? What if Honor House products did not exist? What if the address was fake? You thought about writing them a letter asking where your submarine was, but you did not have the stamp money because you had spent everything on the submarine. You checked the mailbox twice a day, before school and after school. Your mother said you are going to wear out the hinges on that mailbox. You said nothing. You could not explain to your mother what it felt like to wait for a submarine. Week 5 was resignation. It was not coming. They had taken your money. $6.98. Every bottle return. Every lawn. Every quarter from Mrs. Patterson. Gone. You told yourself you were stupid. You told yourself you should have known. You told yourself that Tommy was right. And you were a liar, and there was no submarine, and there never was going to be a submarine, and Honor House Products was a company made of liars who stole money from children through the back pages of comic books. Week 6, you stopped checking. You walked past the mailbox without looking. You went inside. You put your book bag on the kitchen chair. Your mother was at the stove. She said there is something on the porch for you. You walked to the front door, you opened it, and there it was, a package, brown paper, flat, long, leaning against the railing like it had been waiting there all day. Your name was on the label. Your heart was in your throat. You dragged it inside. It was lighter than you expected, much lighter. A submarine should be heavy. A submarine should feel like something you could take underwater. This felt like something you could carry under one arm. You tore the brown paper off, and inside was a flat cardboard box. And inside the box were flat pieces of cardboard and a sheet of instructions and a bag of plastic parts, and your stomach dropped. Cardboard. The Polaris Nuclear Submarine was made of cardboard, not metal, not fiberglass, not whatever submarines are made of. Cardboard. Pre-cut cardboard with fold lines and tabs and slots and printed dials and gauges that you could not turn because they were printed on the cardboard. The Periscope was a cardboard tube. The torpedoes were rubber band powered plastic sticks. The rockets were the same. The conning tower was a cardboard box that fit on top of a bigger cardboard box. And the whole thing, when assembled, was 7 feet of gray corrugated cardboard that looked like a submarine the way a drawing of a horse looks like a horse, from a distance, if you squinted, in the dark. You sat on the living room floor with the pieces spread around you, and you did not cry because you were 8, and 8-year-old boys did not cry about toys. But something happened inside you that was worse than crying. Something closed. The part of you that had believed the ad, the part that had calculated the weeks and counted the coins and taped the quarters to cardboard and walked to the mailbox and pulled the handle down and trusted that the world would give you what it promised if you paid the price. That part closed. Not all the way, but enough. Enough to make you look at the next comic book ad and think probably not. Enough to make you walk past the sea monkeys and the X-ray specs and the 100 toy soldiers without circling them with a red pen. You had learned something about the world on the living room floor that afternoon. You had learned that pictures lie. You had learned that 7 feet long does not mean what you think it means. You had learned that $6.98 buys you exactly $6.98 worth of cardboard, and you were 8. Your father came home from work. He walked into the living room and saw the pieces of cardboard on the floor, and he looked at you, and he did not say, "I told you so." He knelt down and picked up the instructions and read them and said, "Hand me that piece." For the next 2 hours, your father helped you build a 7-foot cardboard submarine on the living room floor. He folded the tabs. He fitted the slots. He held the pieces while you pushed the conning tower into place. He attached the periscope tube. He loaded the torpedo launcher with the rubber band. When it was done, when this gray cardboard box sat in the middle of the living room looking like a coffin with ambition, your father said, "Get in." You crawled through the hatch, you sat inside, your knees were against the front wall, your back was against the rear wall. The conning tower was above your head, the periscope was at eye level, the printed dials were in front of you. You looked through the periscope and you could see the living room through a cardboard tube, and your father was standing there looking down at you. And you were inside a submarine, and it was made of cardboard, and it cost $6.98, and it was the greatest thing you had ever owned. Because that is what happened. That is what nobody who did not order one will ever understand. The disappointment lasted 5 minutes. The imagination lasted 5 weeks. You sat in that submarine every morning at 5 a.m. before anyone else was awake. You sat in the dark with the printed dials in front of you, and you turned them with your fingers even though they did not move. You looked through the periscope, and the living room was the Atlantic Ocean. The couch was an enemy destroyer. The coffee table was an iceberg. You fired the torpedo, and the rubber band snapped, and the plastic stick flew 3 feet and hit the carpet, and you reloaded and fired again. You were the captain. You were underwater. You were in command of a vessel made of cardboard and imagination and $6.98 worth of belief that had been betrayed and then rebuilt in the same afternoon. Your friend came over and you both fit inside. The ad said big enough for 2 kids, and that part was true if both kids were small, and neither one minded having the other kid's elbow in his ribs. You sat inside that submarine, and you planned missions. You drew maps on paper and taped them to the inside wall. You made engine sounds with your mouth. You argued about who got to look through the periscope. You ate sandwiches inside the submarine, and the crumbs fell into the folds of the cardboard, and your mother said you are not eating lunch inside that thing anymore, and you ate lunch inside that thing the next day. It rained on a Tuesday night 3 weeks later. The submarine was in the backyard. You had dragged it out there because the living room was not the ocean, and the backyard was closer to the ocean than the living room. You forgot to bring it inside before bed. Your mother did not remind you. The rain started at midnight, and by morning the conning tower had collapsed. The walls were soft, the periscope hung at an angle like a broken neck, and when you pushed on the hull, your finger went through it. 7 feet of cardboard, 3 weeks of missions, 1 night of rain, and it was over. You did not order another one. You did not order the Frontier cabin or the Roman soldier set or the 7-foot monster ghost. You had learned the lesson that every American boy who read comic books in the 1960s and 70s eventually learned. The back pages lied. The sea monkeys were brine shrimp. The X-ray specs were a piece of cardboard with a feather in it. The 100 toy soldiers were flat plastic figures the size of your thumbnail. And the Polaris Nuclear Submarine was a box made of cardboard by a company called Honor House Products in Lynbrook, New York, that does not exist anymore. Honor House is gone. The address is gone. The ad is gone. The comic books are in a landfill somewhere, and the submarine dissolved in the rain 40 years ago on a Tuesday night in a backyard that belongs to someone else now. There is no museum. There is no website. There is no one left to write to and ask for a refund. The company that broke your heart did not even have the decency to stick around long enough for you to tell them what they did to you. But you still remember the inside. You remember the printed dials. You remember the periscope tube. You remember the sound of the rubber band torpedo snapping across the carpet. You remember sitting in the dark at 5 a.m. with your knees against the front wall and the whole ocean in front of you, and nobody awake in the house except you and the enemy approaching off the port bow. You were 8 years old. You had been lied to by a comic book ad and betrayed by a company that sold dreams in flat brown envelopes. And you sat inside the lie and you made it true. Because that is what 8-year-old boys do. They do not see cardboard, they see submarines. Did you order one? Did you wait the 8 weeks? Did yours survive the rain? And if you were one of the boys who stared at the ad but never sent the money, what stopped you? Was it your father? Was it the price? Or was it the quiet voice in the back of your head that said, "This might be too good to be true, tell us"? I read every single comment.